Hello, my name is Julia Sherwood, and I'm going to read an excerpt from 7 Days to the Funeral by Ján Rozner, which I have translated from the Slovak jointly with my husband Peter Sherwood, and which has just been published by Karolinum Press in Prague as part of its Modern Slovak Classics series. The author of this book, Ján Rozner, was a theatre, film and literary critic and translator who died in 2006 in exile in Germany. And this is a work of autofiction framed as an account of the week following the death of the narrator's first wife, Zora Jesenská, a renowned translator from the Russian. The book offers a fascinating insight into the cultural and political history of Czechoslovakia from 1945 till 1972, but it's also a moving account of an unlikely love story. The excerpt I've chosen is set in the evening after the wife of the narrator, Zora Jesenská, has died, and a bunch of friends and relatives who have learned the news have gathered in his flat to commiserate him. And I think it will give you a very good taste of how in Czechoslovakia in 1972, the even private grief became a political matter. One after the other, they recalled the last time they'd seen his wife, where it was and what she'd said. And everyone said in one way or another what a great tragedy this was, a great loss to literature, and all the things she might still have done, except for his brother and his family, who didn't say a word. The babel of voices was interrupted by Věra R., who said he should ring the state press agency ČTK, as they ought to report it. Surely ČTK has to issue a press release when such a major public figure passes away. But he shook his head. I'm not going to ring them, not now. The last two words occurred to him as an afterthought, as he didn't feel like explaining that he was not going to ring them ever. Věra R. was a bit baffled and said, well, in that case, he should ring the Writers' Union first thing tomorrow. They would draw up an official notice for ČTK. What planet is she on, he thought, but all he said was, but she's not a member. But then his sister-in-law chimed in a firm, belligerent tone, that he should definitely contact a newspaper tomorrow and get them to publish a large death notice in a black frame. He nodded, as if in agreement. Here's another person from another planet. Now there was no getting around it. He had to explain, so he began. He wasn't going to ring anyone. His wife's death wouldn't be reported in any newspaper anyway, because she was no longer a public figure. She'd been expunged from public life, her name taken out of circulation, and it was forbidden. Do you understand? Forbidden, he stressed with irritation, to mention her name anywhere. And as for a death notice in a newspaper, it was the same. Anybody, including someone completely unknown, could place such a notice in a paper. But if the person who died was no longer allowed to exist in public life, and it was forbidden to utter their name in public, not even in a death notice, a paper would either refuse to print it or it would be censored. Well, that was the situation. He spoke quickly and with irritation. It made him quite cross to hear them speak as if they were unaware of the situation his wife had found herself in for the past 3 years. The ideas they come up with, he thought, as if she'd lived a normal life before. But then another thing occurred to him. Now he spoke almost casually, as if telling an anecdote, his fury having evaporated again. The other day, on the spur of the moment, he'd gone to the university library. He thought he would check in the card index to see which of her translations and books had disappeared, and he found no index card with her name on it, not a single one. Her name had vanished, and he couldn't help himself and added, so had mine, actually. The babel of voices resumed. Everyone except his brother and his wife considered it their duty to react with an indignant comment. Who would have thought that just 4 years ago that this kind of thing could happen? But it had. He was only listening with half an ear, as he'd heard all this 100 times before, in relation to other people as well. When this new era began, he too had often voiced his indignation, but it had turned into endless waffling about the same subject, the flogging of a dead horse. It was now part and parcel of everyday life, and therefore it was pointless even to discuss it. But just then, perhaps thinking along the same lines, and in an attempt to move on to practical business, it was getting late, Martin asked him, "By the way, have you given any thought to the funeral and who might give the eulogy?" He felt as if someone had whacked him on the head with a truncheon. No, he hadn't given that any thought at all. He saw the funeral as being somewhere way off in the far distance, but it hadn't occurred to him that a funeral, like a mass, consists of several phases, stages, the eulogy being one of them. He knew at once that he wouldn't be able to come up with the name of anyone who could give the eulogy. The few people they were still in touch with had also been cast aside, so he couldn't ask them to make a public appearance and give a speech. And every one of those still allowed to appear in public, to lecture and publish, would think him thoughtless and impudent to expect them to do such a thing. And in private they would think, she shouldn't have meddled so much, she brought it upon herself, and they would find some excuse or other. Even if he went begging from one person to the next, he wouldn't find anyone. He piped up in a feeble voice, "Not really. I can't think of anyone who could give the eulogy." Thank you for listening.